The case of Mike Amesbury, I think, strikes at the heart and the um, at the heart of the sort of parliamentary debate that is ongoing about deceit, about lies, about um, the honourable behaviour of those people who have been elected to this sort of top office in the land, and the nature of resignation versus the ignominy of being forced from office because of a criminal conviction, and the peculiar reality that even when disgrace overtakes an elected representative, the trappings of privilege often remain intact as they do now. So we're told that crime doesn't pay. Well, that's not the case with Mike Amesbury, because he's still going to take home £91,000. And at its core, resignation is a voluntary acknowledgement of responsibility. It's not about a criminal admission. It's not about an admission of crime. It's about a recognition that you have fallen below the level of honour that is appropriate to your office. When an MP chooses to step down, they are in effect taking personal responsibility for their actions. They're opening a door to a process of renewal, not necessarily about crime. In this light, resignation is not simply an admission of fault. It's a dignified recognition that public office is not a means of personal aggrandizement, but a trust between the public and their representative, a trust bestowed on people who serve with integrity. It's an act of moral clarity. And voluntary resignation allows for an orderly transition, enabling constituents to reclaim their voice through a fresh mandate and ensuring that the representative body remains credible. Mike Amesbury has demonstrated that he's a thug and a scoundrel, and that his command of language is beneath contempt. And his reference to somebody who he's just pushed, who he's just punched, as being soft or effing soft, is simply the language of somebody who does not deserve to hold public office again. And he knew what he said. It was on record. It was filmed, and he knew what he said when he did it. He didn't need a court case to find him guilty or not guilty. He knew at that moment that he did not deserve the trappings of political office. And so did other people in his party. And this is what I find so regrettable. Now they're coming out and they're saying, oh, he should resign. Or he should face a recall. Yvette Cooper is saying this today. She's late. She's late because she doesn't seem to understand the difference between a criminal prosecution that has its own rules, and you don't get in the way of a criminal prosecution, and the honourable actions of members of the House of Commons. The two things are separate. And we need a mechanism for separating those two. We don't have one at the moment. And so often we find ourselves in a position where people in the House of Commons are saying, "Oh, the law must take its course. This is now a matter for the law, and we mustn't comment on it." Well, actually, that's not true. The person themselves who's done something which falls below the standard of public office should be persuaded to resign. Or there should be a mechanism in Parliament to force people who have behaved below the standard of public office to resign. Not a comment on their criminal activity or not. So it could be perfectly in order for somebody to be forced out of Parliament because their behaviour falls below the standard of an honourable member, and yet not merit a criminal record. I could imagine some situations where the opposite would be true. But in this particular case, this is a man who has acted appallingly, who has punched one of his constituents repeatedly, who was caught on camera doing so, And our system is so constrained that not only were people worried and fearful of saying something that might be construed as compromising justice, and therefore he retained his seat up to this present moment, but that he still hasn't resigned, and he's still collecting money. And the ignominy of being forced out of office following a criminal conviction, a jail sentence. In these cases, the departure is not driven by a sense of accountability or moral rectitude, but imposed by the machinery of law and public outcry. And the case of the MP Mike Amesbury, therefore, sentenced to 10 weeks in custody for assault, his predicament starkly illustrates the difference between honour and scurrilous behaviour. While an honourable resignation is a proactive and self-directed act, a forced exit is reactive, imposed by circumstance and scandal. And when a public servant is ejected from office by judicial means, it underscores a failure in personal conduct. It also underscores a failure in the House of Commons. Yet, even in disgrace, the paradox emerges. Amesbury, despite his conviction, remains entitled to his full salary and additional allowances until his parliamentary status is formally revoked. This outcome is not only counterintuitive, but it sends a damaging message that even criminal behaviour might, in certain institutional contexts, yield undeserved financial benefit. Crime pays. Now, that's the message that Britain is now sending out to the world. That in Britain, crime pays. If you're a member of the House of Commons, if you've been elected to public office, crime pays. And the situation is compounded by the fact that under parliamentary rules, an MP continues to receive a substantial remuneration despite being behind bars for hitting his constituents. The full salary, along with any resignation allowance or additional benefits accrued during the appeals process, persists as long as the individual retains their status as an MP. And this arrangement starkly contrasts with the public's expectation that criminal behaviour in office should come at a steep personal cost, not merely in reputation, but in the material rewards of the position. Such a system where crime pays risks undermining public confidence, doesn't it? It creates an environment in which the sanctity of the office is compromised by archaic rules that fail to adapt to the modern standards of accountability. And the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, encapsulates this sentiment when she says that the people of Runcorn deserve better than an MP, and certainly that this MP should not be allowed to benefit financially while serving time for criminal conduct. But that situation should have been addressed long ago, and her comments should have been made in the summer. Her call for either his voluntary resignation or the initiation of a recall petition reflects a deep-seated frustration with a system that, on the face of it, seems to reward rather than penalise misconduct. And it must be wrong. And it raises broader questions about the integrity of our democratic institutions in Britain. When an MP is permitted to retain his salary, despite a custodial sentence, it suggests a disconcerting disconnect between the ethical responsibilities of public office and the legal frameworks that govern it. And the recall process, which is meant to act as a corrective measure, triggered only when a sufficient percentage of constituents demand a by-election, serves as a reactive tool rather than a preventative one. And this process, in effect, allows the continuity of financial privilege until public pressure finally forces a change in the situation. And such institutional inconsistencies not only breed cynicism, but they call into question the very nature of representation. Shouldn't the role of an MP be predicated on unwavering accountability, where personal misconduct translates into tangible consequences? The enduring pay and the benefits of a disgraced MP do little to build and to restore public trust. Rather, they reinforce the perception that political office is insulated from the full impact of criminal behaviour. And history is not without precedent for these dilemmas. Consider the case of Fiona Onasanya, the person who was jailed in 2019, who faced public indignation over her continued receipt of a salary. In both instances, the public outcry was not merely about the crime itself, but about the incongruity between the punishment and the unmitigated rewards of office. So it's not that this is without precedent. It's not that this hasn't been anticipated. These cases compel us to ask, if an MP's actions betray the trust of their constituents, why should they continue to enjoy the financial benefits of a position they no longer deserve? The call for reform is both urgent and inevitable. It's incumbent upon our institutions to revisit the rules that allow financial entitlements to persist in the face of criminal behaviour. A robust framework should ensure that should an MP be convicted of an offence that undermines their capacity to serve, the associated privileges, salary, allowances and other benefits are proportionally curtailed or suspended immediately. And there are divergent pathways here. The honourable resignation, which is a conscious self-imposed act of accountability, and the dishonour of a forced exit precipitated by legal sanctions. The former is an act of integrity, a voluntary relinquishment of power in recognition of a moral failing or an accident or whatever, thereby safeguarding the dignity of the office. And if that isn't possible, the latter is a scenario marred by institutional inertia where even a disgraceful exit fails to strip an individual of the financial rewards that come with power. There has to be a system in place which is retroactive. If somebody fails to resign at the moment when they know they've done something inappropriate that might, for example, trigger a criminal case, then when that criminal case yields its result as it has here, then there should be a retroactive penalty, and all the financial benefits should go. It's a dichotomy that sends a troubling signal to the public otherwise, that the system inadvertently is designed to reward criminal behaviour rather than uphold the high standards expected of public service. It's a reminder that reforms are essential, reforms that ensure accountability. This is not just about public sentiment, but it should be enshrined in the very operational framework of our parliamentary system. And if it's not, and if this isn't done soon, then I think there will be an outcry. We need to advocate for a more robust system. And today, it seems so much is about doing things too late. The Reynolds boy, the fellow who claimed to be a solicitor, has apologised. Well, too late. Boris Johnson has talked about the ghastly things that Trump has said. A little bit too late. I mean, Boris is to a certain extent in a better position because at least he's doing it from Ukraine. At least he's put his neck on the line a little, taken the train to Ukraine, and is saying it there. But we elect people to office to represent us. If they can't represent us in the best possible way, then they should not be in office. I mentioned Boris, but Boris, of course, is no longer elected. Boris is a has-been MP. But we need to restore public confidence. We need to ensure that our democratic institutions remain as bastions of integrity rather than monuments to privilege.